For 76 days, Israel had banned all food, medicine, water, and fuel from entering Gaza. The siege had plunged the population into a state of forced starvation. Nearly the entire population of Gaza is facing severe levels of food insecurity, and thousands of children are already suffering from acute malnutrition. These numbers are expected to rise dramatically in the coming months if the blockade is not lifted. Anyway, he's a phenomenal person. Reach out to Theo before someone like Candace Owens does. Ironic you say that because he had me on a show, but he also had Candace Owens before me, the day before me, apparently, and I didn't even know.
Trump finished his week-long trip to the Middle East this morning with deal-making front and center of his agenda. He made one last sales pitch to the region's business leaders, hoping they will invest as much as possible in the U.S. Nancy Cortez covered Trump's visit. She joins us now from Abu Dhabi, capital of the United Arab Emirates. Nancy, good morning.
Good morning, Nate. The president just departed Abu Dhabi after touting billions of dollars worth of new investments in U.S. companies, especially when it comes to AI, airplanes, and military equipment. He leaves without a breakthrough in the Gaza-Israel conflict, but this was less of a trip focused on regional tension and more of a trip focused on dollars and cents.
Yeah, I mean, exactly, as expected.
Boeing makes the best plane.
The president served as pitchman for U.S. industry this morning as business leaders here in Abu Dhabi did their best to impress.
We're also announcing today our first flight to Charlotte.
Oh, good.
North Carolina. Today, North Carolina.
That's a good place.
This first major foreign trip of Trump's second term was a departure from traditional foreign policy. Instead, it was diplomacy by commerce.
So it's over $200 billion, but 160 in terms of the jets. That's fantastic. 600 billion knowing it will be $1 trillion.
Trump bypassed long-standing regional allies like Israel and Jordan to visit three booming oil and gas-rich Gulf states.
We have a president of the United States doing the selling.
It's hard to know at this point how much of this investment was driven by the salesman-in-chief and how much was already in the works. These quickly growing countries have been aggressively importing American excellence for years. The Cleveland Clinic opened an outpost in Abu Dhabi in 2015, and Disney just announced plans to build a new theme park here.
Fantastic.
Indoors to beat the heat. In all three nations, Trump urged the leaders to go even bigger and buy even more from us.
We're a hot country just like you're a hot area. I can tell you that our country is hot. It's hot as a pistol. We were not such a hot country 6 months ago. And now I think we're the hottest country, if you want to know the truth.
President Trump is now on his way back to the...
They're not just milking Trump. Trump is milking them as well. It's just direct quid pro quo, corrupt deal making. And the way it's taking place, is happening in the backdrop of a fucking genocide that has escalated as Israel seeks to punish the Palestinian civilian population again and again and again because they feel angry and resentful that Trump even aesthetically sidestepped them to talk to Hamas directly. And here's a good take as well. If democratic elections were held today in Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar, Jordan, Egypt, they would elect governments that will break off all relations with the genocide and vow to destroy it. So the U.S. props up fascist puppets that violently suppress them. That's it. When Iran retaliated against the genocidal Zionist entity, the U.S. NATO-Israeli Empire's Arab Shield was activated, literally shooting down missiles aimed at Israel, risking the lives of their own people. That is how much contempt these fascist puppets have for their own population. They literally shot missiles at the Iranian missiles that fell on top of their own citizens, potentially. And Egypt is a great example of this because they did have elections, and then, lo and behold, a coup took place. That is not true at all. Yeah? Why are these countries ruled by monarchies still? I thought America cared about democracy. You think that's not by design? Why did the Jordanian king train with the British Navy? The King, then why is Israel still geopolitically important to the U.S. Now, when all Arab and neighboring countries in the Emmy are U.S. puppets now? Because why would you? Gulf citizens don't care? That's not true. No, that's not true. That's absolutely not true. If you think that Arab citizens are there, if you think that Arab citizens across the board are not are oblivious or careless or don't give a shit, you are delusional, because that is the only reason why the Gulf leadership still maintains this posture towards Palestinians. The only reason why leadership in that region makes it seem as though they care about Palestinians is so that they don't have rebellion, okay? Because the reality of the matter is you have to at least like offer something to your citizens. And the same goes for Turkey as well. Why do you think Erdogan makes it seem as though he is positioned against Israel over and over and over again? The reason why, by the way, I'm Lebanese and half the population was against involvement in the Palestine situation is such a funny thing to mention, because Lebanon was literally packing up pro-Palestinian protesters and putting them in unmarked vans and shit and arresting them. What are you talking about? In many of these countries, like if you have a Palestine flag in Mecca, they will take it away from you. That's in Mecca. That's the heart of Islam, right? I think it's completely ridiculous. Gulf citizens literally can't speak. It's illegal to criticize normalization with Israel in the UAE. Yeah. UAE government intensifies suppression of voices opposing its policies, escalates rights violations. But of course, none of this is ever talked about. Why is none of this ever talked about in the Western media? Just like the same people that constantly talk about like Houthis being backwards and homophobic and having horrifying practices against women and all this shit, they don't have a peep to say about any of the Gulf states because they're aligned with Israel. That's it. And therefore, because of their alignment with Israel, America lets them do whatever the they want. And America gives them a steady flow of weapons that they can inevitably use to suppress their own citizens as well if there is some sort of revolt or rebellion, some sort of coup. A recent opinion poll revealed that 96% of Saudis believe that Arab countries should cut all ties with Israel and protest against the Israeli forces' aggression against the Gaza Strip, according to the New York Times. I'm telling you right now, if the Gulf nation states, especially ones that have like high population, a high number of people, as opposed to like a tiny population that benefits tremendously from being oil barons with a healthy dose of subsidies and is almost entirely comprised of like voluntary and involuntary slave labor style practices. Like there's a lot of these Gulf countries that just like don't have a lot of people in them and are simply kept up, propped up by immigrant labor, some of which resembles slave labor practices or are directly considered slave labor practices. If those countries had these chatters making up their own stats when the Lebanese population have 79% support for Hamas outright, not to mention ending a genocide in Palestine. Yeah. Dude, if America is like 53% unfavorable to Israel, if you think the countries that are getting bombed by Israel or within proximity of Israel don't have an even more negative view on Israel, you are delusional. It is the very fact that the citizens of these nation states that have this anti-Israel slant, that is the reason why the Gulf leadership has to make it seem as though they're not super pro-Israel. That is the reason. They have to say that. Otherwise, there will be insane protests that even they cannot squash with all weapons that they get and the American training that they get. Where does Qatar fit in? Qatar is, out of all the Gulf states, the only one that has at least a neutral position on Palestinians. They are still, of course, very much in favor of normalizing with Israel. And they have a similar undemocratic structure as well. But having said that, they are at least neutral. And here's what I wanted to talk about. And this is what my fears were, and my greatest fears are being realized in this process. Hamas says Witkoff personally promised to lift the Gaza blockade in exchange for Eden Alexander. The U.S. immediately broke the deal, senior Hamas official Bassem Naim tells Dropsite. They threw it in the trash, and there's been zero progress on a Gaza ceasefire. A senior Hamas official told Dropsite that the group received a direct commitment from Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, that 2 days after the release of U.S. citizen and Israeli soldier Eden Alexander, the Trump administration would compel Israel to lift the Gaza blockade and allow humanitarian aid to enter the territory. Witkoff, according to the official, also promised that Trump would make a public call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and for negotiations aimed at achieving a permanent ceasefire. It was a deal, said Bassem Naim, a member of Hamas's political bureau who has previously engaged in direct talks with U.S. officials. He said the pledge was made by Witkoff himself. In an interview with Dropsite, Naim said the agreement was if we release Alexander, Trump will speak out thanking Hamas for this gesture, obliging Israel on the second day to open the borders and allow aid to come into Gaza. And Trump would call for an immediate ceasefire and to go for negotiations to end the war. He did nothing of this, Naim added. They didn't violate the deal. They threw it in the trash. The White House did not respond to a request for comment. The release of Alexander, who was taken by Palestinian fighters on October 7, 2023 from the Israeli military base where he was stationed, was a significant event. He was the first male soldier freed by Hamas since the war began 19 months ago. Hamas said it freed him as a gesture of goodwill towards Trump because it believed it had received commitment. A commitment Alexander's release would result in the immediate delivery of food, medicine, and fuel into Gaza. On Friday, as Trump wrapped up his tour of Gulf nations, he briefly addressed the Gaza war and the dire humanitarian catastrophe caused by Israel's full-spectrum blockade of Gaza. For 76 days, Israel had banned all food, medicine, water, and fuel from entering Gaza. The siege had plunged the population into a state of forced starvation. Nearly the entire population of Gaza is facing severe levels of food insecurity, and thousands of children are already suffering from acute malnutrition. These numbers are expected to rise dramatically in the coming months if the blockade is not lifted. We're looking at Gaza, and we got to get that taken care of, Trump said at a public event in the UAE. A lot of people are starving. A lot of people. There's a lot of bad things going on. Naim acknowledged Trump's remarks about starvation in Gaza, but pointed out that the day prior, Trump had once again raised the prospect of the U.S. seizing Gaza and saying he'd be proud to take the Palestinian territory and make it just a freedom zone. In February, standing alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House, Trump announced that he wanted to transform Gaza into a U.S.-owned Middle East Riviera. You are not dealing with steady, stable politics, said Naim. Trump can say what he wants. We are looking for actions. Now, I want to maintain something here, okay? It's a position that I've had for a long time, okay? Which is that Hamas and Iran, regardless of their domestic affairs, regardless of their fucking worldview or fundamentalist perspectives from time to time, especially with the Iranian leadership, are far more restrained diplomats because they have to be. Okay, because they recognize that their position is lower than dirt in the global eyes, in the global stage. And for this reason, they are always a much better party to negotiate with than fucking Israel. But because America does not give a shit about them due to their position that they will always be dominated, especially Hamas, that will always be dominated by the belligerent occupier Israel, that they don't care. They fucking come in and they say, oh, yeah, we'll cut a side deal with you. And then they fuck off. Steve Witkoff did this with the previous ceasefire. I talked about it. And the role that it plays in my assessment of this current ceasefire or the potential for a ceasefire coming up when I said they did this one time, they're probably going to do it again. Hamas and all Palestinians across the board are completely alone. Okay? They're alone. None of the Gulf leadership cares about their well-being. None of them care enough to stop this genocide. They care about getting good business deals done. Okay? Even Iran doesn't fucking care about the Palestinians as much as people seem to think that they do. That's it. And the only other group, the two groups that actually cared, one has had its entire leadership structure decapitated with a fuck ton of civilian deaths accompanied with it, Hezbollah. And the only other group that actually cares in the region and actually does something about it is Yemen, is the Ansar Allah movement, also colloquially known as the Houthis. That's it. Trump's humanitarian plan, both the U.S. and Israel has been pushing plans which would not be linked to any ceasefire to deliver aid in the Gaza Strip. The White House has said it would empower a newly created NGO to formally run the program alongside U.S. security contractors. This proposal for aid distribution involves a system of political vetting and calorie restrictions, and it would require Palestinians to travel long distances to pass extensive security checks to receive meager rations of food. Pre-approved representatives of families in Gaza would be permitted to pick up food supplies once every other week under the plan. While Israeli forces would not distribute the aid, the army would be involved with security. It's literally straight up Auschwitz shit, okay? It's fucking insane. Yes, I know. My Kyle Kalinske interview just dropped. Yes. The UN and dozens of international aid groups working in Gaza have denounced the proposal, saying it would weaponize access to food and other life-sustaining supplies. They have called for an immediate ceasefire followed by unrestricted aid flowing into Gaza. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a new Trump-backed group registered in Switzerland, said this week it had reached an agreement with Israel to begin operating in Gaza by the end of May. Israel's indicated that the aid distribution would be run from southern Gaza near the border with Egypt. UN officials have warned that the plan could be a part of Israel's stated aim of driving hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from northern and central Gaza to the south. On May 4th, the Israeli cabinet approved a plan codenamed Operation Gideon's Chariot that it threatened to implement if Hamas did not capitulate to Israel's demands by the time Trump finished his tour of the Gulf. Its explicit aim would be the conquest of the Gaza Strip, an open-ended occupation enforced by wide-scale attacks and the destruction of Gaza's remaining infrastructure. Palestinians would be herded into the wasteland of what was once Rafah. In the days leading up to Trump's trip to the Gulf, Netanyahu authorized a dramatic escalation of Israel's terror bombing of Gaza and began amassing troops along the stretches of Gaza. Hold on. In the days leading up to Trump's trip to the Gulf, now we talked about that. On Friday, more than 90 Palestinians were killed and over 200 wounded in Israeli attacks, according to Gaza's health ministry. Nearly 3,000 Palestinians have been killed since Israel resumed its relentless assault on March 18th, with at least 250 killed in just the past 2 days. The ministry's Director General, Minir al-Barsh, described the attacks on the Strip as the most heinous massacres of ethnic cleansing. The Israeli military has issued mass displacement orders for Beit Lahia, Jabalia, and other northern areas, causing panicked families to flee their homes with no safe haven to go to. Whether you're in shelters, tents, buildings, evacuate to the south immediately, read leaflets dropped by the Israeli military over the areas. In northern Gaza, paramedic Mohammed Abu Luai reported over 15 airstrikes hitting densely populated residential zones, including Tal al-Zatar and Jabalia camp. Entire families remain trapped or missing under the rubble. Mahmoud Bazal, spokesman for Gaza Civil Defense, described the assault as a night of horrors of the Day of Judgment. He described Israeli forces intensifying indiscriminate bombings, striking inhabited homes without warning and targeting ambulance crews attempting to reach survivors, in a process known as double striking or double tapping, where they hit an area and then ambulances come and first responders come and people try to take people out of the rubble, and they hit the people that are trying to take people out of the rubble. Hamas says zero progress has been made on the ceasefire, while Witkoff, according to Hamas, has promised the U.S. would facilitate the lifting of Israel's blockade on Gaza 2 days after Alexander's release. The U.S. appeared to completely abandon the agreement. On May 13th, the day after Hamas freed Alexander, Israel launched a massive series of airstrikes. Israeli officials have suggested that targeting Sinwar would soften Hamas's stance in negotiations, claiming that Qassam commander was enforcing a hard line. Hamas has not confirmed Sinwar's death, and Naim dismissed the idea that killing him would have any impact. I think this is part of the Israeli strategy, but it is proven that the strategy is failing for 17 months. They have killed Yahya Sinwar, they have killed Dave, they have killed Marwan Issa, killed a lot of leaders, and no one has witnessed a clear breakdown, not only in the negotiation, but also in the whole battle, the whole fighters, tactics, and strategies, Naim said. This is the other side of the story, is that the reason why you're not seeing a lot of Israeli soldiers die right now is because they're cowardly lobbing missiles, okay, from their planes against a defenseless population. But once the ground invasion starts, deaths are obviously also going to escalate. But you will see whether or not Hamas or any fucking militant resistance group has the capacity to fight back. This is precisely what happened last time they invaded with boots on the ground. And even then, it doesn't matter, because before a single Israeli occupying force boot hits the ground, Israel pummels that ground into oblivion. Witkoff and Adam Baylor, the White House special envoy on hostages, held several meetings in Doha this week with Israeli negotiators as well as with regional mediators from Qatar and Egypt. While both U.S. officials publicly expressed optimism this week that a deal could be on the horizon, Naim said that there's been no progress. Zero, he said. Big zero. They return back to talking about the Israeli proposal or the Israeli Witkoff proposal as if nothing happened during the last 1 or 2 weeks, including the release of Alexander, who was released within the context of direct talks with the Americans, Naeem said. They are insisting on gradual or partial deals. They are talking about partial deals to release some of the prisoners for a temporary ceasefire, and then to go to war, to go for open negotiations without any commitment to end the war. And yes, in the process of this, last night, troops amassed at the border. Heavy reinforcement on the Gaza border tonight. This was last night. I covered this yesterday. Gearing up towards what is expected to be a brutal slaughterhouse-style invasion. They're gearing up for a massive ground operation. And that is precisely the reason why the bombing that took place, the bombings that have been taking place, looks exactly like the bombings that took place in the immediate aftermath of October 7, before the relentless bombing campaigns, before the ground invasion, because Israelis are fucking cowards, okay? They are the most cowardly diaper brigade on the fucking planet. The only enemy combatants that they could kill are fucking children in cribs, okay? And even then, they do it by lobbing missiles from airplanes. That's it. This is why calling this a war is fucking ridiculous. Israel is a belligerent occupier on the Gaza Strip. It's not a war when you get to control all of the fucking supplies. It's not like state versus state violence. Okay? What? Holy shit. UN tariff news? And you tariff news? What? U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke by phone with Prime Minister Netanyahu and told him that the Trump administration is concerned about the humanitarian situation in Gaza. How is this any different than what Biden has been fucking saying? So yeah, excuse me if my words actually frustrate you when I say fuck Israel, okay? Fuck Israel. And fuck anyone that defends Israel, okay? They are doing a live-streamed Holocaust. And anyone, especially at this point, that still tries to fucking defend any piece of this is a disgusting, repulsive monster. The picture of the swastika is Matt Walsh. We're going to talk about that later. Israeli news outlets reported Friday that no breakthroughs had occurred in Doha this week. Ynet reported that after 2 days of meetings, Witkoff has given up and is letting Israel make the decisions. The Times of Israel reported, in the face of Netanyahu's refusal to make any concessions, Witkoff has told other mediators that Washington doesn't plan to force Israel to end the war in Gaza. Now, what's absolutely unacceptable, in this is, unacceptable in this process is that Trump controls Israel, okay? The American government has unlimited power over Israel. Israel could not even defend itself for a second if it wasn't for American weapons, American targeting systems, American shields, American defense, American munitions, and the coalition that America has put together in the region to defend it, okay? The idea that Israel will be able to fucking do a 7-front war and also simultaneously defend itself is ridiculous. They caught you talking shit about getting detained. Homeland Security says you lie for likes. The news are talking on how you were talking shit about getting detained. They said federal agents are denying this. That's a really interesting way to fucking demonstrate that you have no critical thinking skills or you don't even know how to read what the news are saying. Yes, the Department of Homeland Security said I'm lying for likes about the way that I was detained or the reasons for my detainment, which of course they're going to fucking say. They're the goddamn government. But even the Department of Homeland Security does not deny that I was detained at all. Are you fucking stupid? Do you not understand how words work? Also, lying for likes is so funny. It's just like boomer shit. Yeah, we're just two sides of the same coin. Is fucking idiotic. This person doesn't know anything he's talking about and literally relies on fucking ChatGPT. Come on, dude. Endless well of stupidity here. I'm sorry. Go watch Asmongold. Why are you watching me? God damn. Trump administration is working on plan to move 1 million Palestinians to Libya, by the way. Details are murky and no final agreement has been reached, but the plan is under serious enough consideration that the administration has discussed it with the Libyan leadership. The current Libyan leadership is in the pocket of Erdogan with the same designs for the region that I was talking about. And this is, again, ethnic cleansing. The Trump administration is working on a plan to permanently relocate up to 1 million Palestinians from the Gaza Strip to Libya. 5 people were working knowledge of the effort, told NBC News. The plan is under serious enough consideration that the administration has discussed it with Libya's leadership. 2 people with direct knowledge of the plans, and a former U.S. official said. In exchange for the resettling of Palestinians, the administration would potentially release to Libya billions of dollars of funds that the U.S. froze more than a decade ago. No final agreement has been reached, and Israel has been kept informed of the administration's discussions. The State Department, current Libyan president and prime minister fled Libya 3 days ago, by the way. The State Department and National Security Council did not respond to multiple requests for comment. The situation on the ground is untenable for such a plan. Such a plan was not discussed and makes no sense, the spokesperson said. Bassem Haim, a senior Hamas official, said that Hamas and the U.S. designated terror groups that has run Gaza was not aware of any discussions about moving Palestinians to Libya. Palestinians are very rooted in their homeland, very strongly committed to their homeland, and are ready to fight up until the end and sacrifice anything to defend their land, their homeland, their families, and the future of their children, Naim said. In response to questions from NBC News, Palestinians are exclusively the only party who have the right to decide for the Palestinians, including Gaza and Gazans, what to do and what not to do. Representatives of the Israeli government declined the comment. Libya has been plagued by instability and warring political factions throughout the nearly 14 years since the civil war broke out in the country and its longtime dictator Muammar Gaddafi was toppled. That's a fun way to describe the events that unfolded. Libya is struggling to take care of its current population as two rival governments, one in the west, led by Abdul Hamid Dbeibeh, and the other in the east, led by Khalifa Haftar, are actively and violently fighting for control. The State Department currently advises Americans not to travel to Libya due to crime, terrorism, unexploded landmines, civil unrest, kidnapping, and armed conflict. Dbeibeh's government could not be reached for comment. Haftar's Libyan National Army did not respond to a request for comment. How many Palestinians in Gaza will voluntarily leave to live in Libya is an open question. One idea administration officials discuss is to provide Palestinians with financial incentives, such as free housing and even a stipend, a former U.S. official said. The details of when or how any plan to relocate Palestinians to Libya could be implemented are murky, and an effort to resettle up to 1 million people there would likely face significant obstacles. Such an effort would likely be extremely expensive, and it's not clear how the Trump administration would seek to pay for it. In the past, the administration said Arab nations would help with the rebuilding of Gaza. Yes, you are respected by many mainstream establishment media, no matter how many viewer Epstein or as Dumbfold has. Doesn't matter. Nobody knows who they are. Nobody's lining up on their door begging for an interview. You have institutional popularity, which is much more than Twitch numbers. I know you know that and agree. No, the question I have always for people like this that are fans of people like this is always like, do you think all these other fucking adults in mainstream news and shit are just like duped? They're blinded? They haven't watched the appropriate number of YouTube videos? Is that what it is? Or perhaps they don't fucking respect people like Asmongold who live in rot. Or they don't respect people like Ethan Klein, who are very clearly unstable. Like, what do you think is going on here? If your perspective on someone like myself is so directly at odds with what the overwhelming number of fucking adults believe, then don't you think you should, at the very least, entertain that you might have been duped? I'm not asking you to just, like, switch your worldview overnight, okay? I'm not asking you to switch your view overnight. I have academics on this broadcast all the time. I have award-winning journalists on this broadcast all the time. Why the fuck do you think they come here? And also, why the fuck do you think what their output looks like is very close to what my output looks like? You know? Why? Do you think it's because they're all deluded? Do you think I'm paying all of them? Do you think there's just like mass conspiracy? Or do you think the alternative is that you might be getting things a little wrong? I love you, but the argument doesn't work when the majority of adults that the layman can hear are siding with Israel. That's not even true. That also isn't even true. A lot of the perspective that we have here, that we see online, is just incredibly dumb, incredibly ill-informed, and for the normal person in broad daylight would be seen as like the most repugnant thing anyone has ever said. This is what I tried to remind people when there was that Valentina Gomez chick who was running for Secretary of State. I forget in which state. And she was like constantly dropping the F slur, saying that like Muslim extremists deserve to be executed in the streets, or like gay people need to be killed, stuff like that in Missouri, right? And she gets a lot of fucking clicks on Twitter. And everyone would look at her and point to her to be like, look at how dangerously radicalized the Republicans are. And it's true, to a certain degree, there are a lot of Republicans who agree with that. And she got 7th place in Missouri. And at the time I said, if any person in Missouri, any person whatsoever, even a fucking like right-wing Republican in Missouri was walking down the street and they heard Valentina Gomez say those things, you know, dropping the F slur, saying that gay people need to be killed and they're pedophiles, they would fucking beat her ass. Okay? The idea that, like, what pops off on the internet, especially on Twitter, and now specifically on certain communities on Twitch, or on certain or around certain communities on YouTube, the idea that, like, those attitudes are reflected in broader society is silly. Okay? Just like the entire scope of my perspective is not broadly reflected in society. But the difference, of course, is that I know that, right? Like, I don't think the average American is talking about the legitimacy for resisting against the state of Israel. The average American simply is just looking at this and going, it's really fucked up that children are in bags and getting decapitated by, like, American munitions that Israel's using on them. That's fucked up. We should stop that. That's the average position, okay? That is the position of the average American. Theo Vaughn is a great example of this, yes. But if you were to watch all of these, like, slop tubers or whatever, you would think that was insanely pro-Israel, like insanely pro-Israel. That's not reflected in broader society at all. The only place where you would see that level of support for the dangerous state of Israel would be Congress. Do you understand? That's also part of the reason why. When you look at the likes and shit, even on TikTok, which is certainly a lot more democratic, even though there's a healthy dose of insane right-wing sentiment that pops off there as well, as opposed to Twitter or even Twitch. Very different attitude overall. Anyway, here is the back and forth that I had with Kyle Kalinske the other day.
Welcome, everybody, to Crystal Kyle and Friends. Today it's just Kyle and Hasan. Hasan, thanks for joining me, man. I appreciate it.
Look at how unstable this camera is as opposed to mine. I'm just going to say, you guys always shit on my setup, but setup is pretty fucking goated.
What happened? Why is Crystal not here?
Long story. We normally record in the studio in DC, but we had some family thing at home that we had to take care of in Virginia. And I mean, I literally went to bed at 6:30 in the morning.
Oh, this is just the detainment part. Okay, never mind. If it's just the detainment, I'm not going to watch this. You guys have already heard me speak on this.
They're arresting judges already. They arrested
we talked about a bunch of other stuff as well. He's going to post the rest of it too. Yeah.